Our next speaker is Angelo, and I have to admit, I'll let him say his last name because I'm not sure I would do that justice. Angelo is the CEO and co-founder of Apprentice.io, the leading intelligent solution provider for life sciences that allows manufacturing teams to get critical drugs to market faster and with higher reliability. As a pioneer in AR and AI for human empowerment, Angelo has positioned Apprentice as the worldwide frontrunner for innovative technology. Please welcome Angelo as he explores how to scale pharmaceutical manufacturing development programs.
Thanks, Bob. I'm just going to share my screen here. And Bob, can you confirm you can see my screen?
Yes, we can. It's not in. There you go. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Bob. I'm really excited to connect today because it's been quite a remarkable year. I think this year has been quite challenging for the industry in a number of different ways. But more importantly, we're now seeing that the world has all their eyes on this industry, and that to end this pandemic, the road to that end goes directly through the heart of pharma manufacturing. I think there's never been a time, at least quite like this in the last decade or more, where this industry has been so critical and touches almost every human being on planet Earth. And so, today's talk, what we're going to be talking about is what the industry experienced and how the industry then adopted both intelligent manufacturing and, more importantly, the principles of Pharma 4.0, where in 2020, all of a sudden, this went from being a theory that has been discussed and talked about for many years and something that, I think folks in the industry have been very excited about for quite a while. But then they've been really transitioned into full-blown deployments. But more importantly, those deployments have actually delivered on a lot of really key challenges throughout this year, not just of course, the actual COVID vaccine or therapeutic that is being raced to market as we speak. And as we saw this morning with the news coming out of the UK, with the first Western approval of a COVID vaccine, like I said earlier, the world is now looking at this industry to be able to deliver on and solve the biggest challenges that our world faces this year. But what we're going to be talking about in today's conversation is really about how the industry has not only delivered on those challenges, the ones that are obviously front and center for not only the industry, but the world, but also too, to deliver on a lot of the challenges that companies faced throughout this entire pandemic to ensure that the global drug supply chains stayed open, and how specifically this technology was used to then not only ensure that those supply chains stayed open, but then they could actually deliver on some even bigger challenges to come. So what we're going to be talking about today is what were those challenges during COVID, because there was pretty severe disruption to the entire industry throughout the course of 2020. But then we're going to talk about after that is really the adoption that we saw here at Apprentice throughout the entire industry around how the principles of intelligent manufacturing and Pharma 4.0 were really leveraged to solve those challenges this year. And I really think that these challenges that were solved, there's a lot of key learnings in there, of course, but more importantly, it's setting the stage for what's to come. Because here at Apprentice, we believe that it's not just about solving this today and this year through COVID, but we really believe that this technology now is going to be used to create a lasting impact from not just COVID, but from COVID to cancer. Because to really enable the next wave of therapies that are coming onto the market, cell and gene therapy in particular, there's a lot of demand and need for this type of technology to deliver on not just the theory of these things, but finally its realized potential. So I think there's a lot of excitement around this, and today I'm excited to walk you through what we've seen, at least here at Apprentice, over this stretch of time here in 2020. So getting into some of the challenges that we saw throughout this industry this year, they really kind of fell into two different buckets when it came to specifically around what we saw, how life science manufacturing teams were really dealing with the disruption that COVID provided this year. It was obviously very difficult and obvious around collaboration. We're all currently on Zoom for obvious reasons here. But it wasn't just collaboration that was deeply impacted. We were starting to see, even pretty early on in the pandemic, talking about March, April into May, that actual batch processing execution was starting to be impacted by the result of distributed teams, challenges in the supply chain. I mean, a real host of issues that when you break it down into the individual components, everything from like the obvious stuff around troubleshooting and remote guidance and remote tours, but getting down into actual tech and method transfer was severely disrupted this year. Remote audits and inspections that were happening and they were already previously scheduled because of what happened with the disruptions to travel were either immediately stopped or severely impacted or delayed into the summer months and now into Q3 and 4. But also on the execution side, we saw some really deep disruptions where we saw across our customer base upticks in deviations. We saw training become incredibly more difficult, especially because we had distributed teams who had restricted a lot of the density levels in suite. We saw teams that got sick and actually had team members that were exposed to and had COVID. And how does that then impact the actual disruption, the actual execution, of the process? And how do you then collaborate effectively? How do you execute reliably? How do you do all this then from teams that are at home? Because teams that typically were then collaborating with their colleagues and executing in the manufacturing suite, it's one of those things that it's really exciting to see in the sense that, the teams then really struggle. Well, it's not exciting to see, but the teams really struggled with VPN networks where people were at home and dealing with the challenges of everything that was going on. How do you access this data? How do you go through a release process? How do you go through and actually, interact with all this data when you're not in the actual office? There really were some big challenges this year. Again, beyond just the obvious, which was a COVID vaccine and therapeutic that was being raced to market here in 2020. And so what did we see this year? And I really think what it represented was a pretty massive shift that happened within this industry. Frankly, again, pretty early on in the pandemic. We saw this starting to bubble up in early March into April, but then it really accelerated into the summer months to then meet a lot of these key challenges that were happening. Again, not just on that star stunner, the COVID vaccine and therapeutic, but really across the industry to ensure that the global drug supply chains stayed open. So like I mentioned, Apprentice has built out an intelligent software platform specifically for life science manufacturing. And in 2020, we saw a rate of adoption that for us at least was completely unprecedented. We saw a number of companies across the entire space and across the world deploy this technology for the first time at a rate, like I said, we at least have never seen before. We're across 6 different continents, across 15 of the top 20 and many more companies in the middle of the market and even smaller biotechs deploy this out at a scale across many different sites where we have customers who've deployed this technology up to over 50 sites throughout the network, 40 sites throughout their network, but on average, we've seen close to 20 sites deploy this technology throughout their environment, where that equated to, for us at Apprentice, over 11x growth here in 2020 alone. But why this was so adopted so quickly, we believe, is that the principles of Pharma 4.0 that have been talked about for years now were realized this year in 2020. And so just a quick note for those of you that may not be familiar with Pharma 4.0, at least the concepts of it at least, it's really meant to enable this next wave of intelligent manufacturing to, in our belief, increase your speed to market, because we really are starting to see a number of new molecules coming on the market that really demand a new type of system to meet the challenges that those types of therapeutics face. And so the principles of 4.0, of Pharma 4.0, all go through this intersection and interconnectivity of connecting your people to your process, to your physical environment. It goes beyond just the single screen of an MES system where you have a kind of classic terminal, and you take all this data and you use it in a way, not just where it's hands-free or you use some cool AR or AI in your process, but more importantly, it's being used to then provide context and awareness during execution so that you can provide real-time feedback directly back to the individual as he or she is going through her process or collaborating with individuals around the world. So the impact that we saw of taking these principles of Pharma 4.0 and intelligent manufacturing, what we saw during 2020 was that they were really being used to meet, in our opinion, truly a once in 100-year challenge that this industry has faced. Because it wasn't, again, not just about racing to market a COVID vaccine and therapeutic, which we've had, again, great success with this year as an industry, but really these principles were applied to ensure, like I mentioned, that the entire global drug supply chain continued to stay open throughout this pandemic. And so how specifically this tech was used and these concepts were embedded directly into how our customers then delivered on this technology, it was through our platform that we developed that we launched our 5th version of this platform at the end of 2019. And that platform really encompassed a lot of key ingredients that were then used to then meet the challenges of what this industry faced here in 2020. So its highest level, what we've built out, we're calling an intelligent software platform specifically for life science manufacturing that brought in the concepts of Pharma 4.0, cloud computing, and AI directly embedded into the core of the product. This is not a product that kind of bolted on those components into the process. We instead built it from the start, directly embedded with these concepts to deliver on these new waves and these new challenges that the industry faced. And so what we've built out is what we're calling an intelligent batch execution system, a system that's been designed for batch processing and coming up here for continuous manufacturing, continuous batch processing, where then it's embedding a lot of these tools to then really start to optimize your process, to increase your speed to market, and really look for opportunities from batch to batch and run to run to really understand exactly how your team can then execute more effectively and more reliably. But where we really saw a lot of key uptake here in 2020 was around 2 of our other modules, what we call augmented procedures, which is a really unique concept that we developed within this space, and another tool that is classified as our language independent collaboration tool. This is where manufacturing teams were able to use this technology to collaborate more effectively, not just with their colleagues who were not in the manufacturing suite or at home, but using this around everything from tech transfer and method transfer to FAT, SAT, to remote guidance and tours. And so our language independent collaboration tool for the first wave of the pandemic was really something that we saw adopted at a pretty high rate. But then we started to see in the back half of the summer into Q3 into Q4, our augmented procedures module being used specifically around things like training, reliable execution, process development, and scale up from clinical into commercial manufacturing, specifically because we've developed a way to take an organization's existing paper content, even if that paper content technically for their batch records, SAP, SOPs, or analytical methods already lives in some type of electronic document management system. What we did is we built tools to take those documents, those PDFs, those Word documents, and we could augment those documents and then make them smart. Where then overnight they go from being a paper-based document or paper on glass to then being automatically converted into a series of audio-guided instructions. So then automatically it gets translated into something that, think of it like Google Maps for pharma. We can then layer in augmented reality technique media. So not just what to do, but more importantly, how to do it. And then we have a number of smart tools to be able to capture all of their process data, which then was used, and I have a case study coming up here in 2 slides, to then take all that data and then build predictive models on top of that data to ultimately make an informed decision into the future. So this combination we saw here in 2020 really greatly be leveraged and used throughout the industry to meet a lot of the key challenges that the industry faced this year. I mean, one of those challenges that, of course, was a really big component of 2020, again, the first wave of the pandemic, and now we're starting to see this come back here in the second wave, is when you have distributed teams, people that are not in the actual manufacturing suite, how do you then actually collaborate, communicate, and then be able to troubleshoot, guide, or tour something remotely effectively? We developed a product that we call Tandem, which is what we're calling our language independent global collaboration tool. And how all this works is we use a number of different devices, whether those are smart glasses, whether those are tablets, or whether that's even our smart hub that we have developed that allows teams that are in the manufacturing suite or in the lab, it allows these teams to collaborate more effectively and reliably as they're actually going through and working on their day-to-day process. So during COVID, we saw this technology be adopted, of course, as you can imagine, very, very quickly, that then allowed teams that as they are working from home or stuck in different environments, or where they simply couldn't travel to those sites where they could travel before in the past, we saw that this technology then was embedded in the day-to-day execution flow to allow those teams to be able to collaborate more reliably during the pandemic. And so instead of using the actual radio or using a phone and trying to describe the process, instead we created a number of tools that uses augmented reality and a number of other language independent capabilities around things like real-time captioning, real-time transcription, and some really also advanced features that we've built in that then allows manufacturing teams to more broadly be able to collaborate and communicate regardless of where they were in the world. And so what you're seeing on the screen right now is kind of like a daily workflow for how our customers actually use this software, where then they can actually interact with and have a stand-up with their team as the actual process began when the day kicks off in the morning. They then can take the headset and move over to the point in which they need to actually be collaborating or communicating, and then together with their remote teams who are either at home or somewhere else in the world or even out of the house, they were able to then collaborate more effectively with those teams and do so at a scale that we saw, like I said, across both the entire industry, but not just the industry, across the actual company in this, which was actually using it. So a case study of that on how one of our customers actually did this at scale this year throughout the entire pandemic with the backdrop of the pandemic, where this, I can't unfortunately mention their name due to non-disclosure agreements that we have signed with the organization, but this is a top 10 pharma company that we've been working with for quite a while. But during COVID, pretty much overnight, and when I say overnight, it was in the course of 3 to 4 weeks between end of March and into mid to late April, they deployed this out across the world, across North America, South America, Europe, and Asia, to deploy this at a scale using our rapid deployment kits that we had developed, because the industry faced some key challenges on not just using the software, but how do you actually deploy it? And how do you deploy it when everyone is actually home? So we not only had to build in, of course, a lot of capabilities into the platform itself to deliver on the promises and dreams of Pharma 4.0, but we also had to innovate on how does this actually get deployed and how can you do that at scale with the backdrop of a pandemic. And so we developed this concept of rapid deployment kits, where then we can ship these kits around the world very quickly to our customers, but more importantly, our customers then were able to get up and running with this technology at the actual individual site level very quickly, based on how we then developed this kind of fast configuration engine to allow for the quick connection into the actual system. So during COVID now, you had a situation where the industry really needed this technology. Then we were able to deploy this technology, but then they start to realize a lot of high benefits with this technology in 2020 to solve some key challenges. Where for this customer in particular, they were seeing incredibly fast speed to resolution around things from troubleshooting to training to tours to just overall tech transfer and method transfer between sites and collaboration between sites for people that, of course, couldn't actually travel throughout the pandemic, where they were able to execute multiple successful tech transfers, multiple remote audits, tours, and inspections here in 2020. But then the rest of our platform was then used at this company for then faster training for these distributed teams that they then start to have, where all of a sudden everyone started going home, and the luxury of being able to have people shoulder to shoulder where they were actually going through and both developing the training content, but also executing on the training content. That's something that then they were able to adopt this technology to deliver on and move those teams from immediately from paper to digital, but more importantly, digital into this new intelligent world, where then they were able to execute on a lot of these processes and training procedures across these different devices, layering in augmented reality technique media, and then executing on those augmented batch records and augmented procedures to really deliver on some key challenges that they faced this year. But then, of course, though, all of that was then also used for then faster data capture and feedback cycles, where then out of the box, then they were able to use this system to be able to capture a lot of their process data for the folks that were using it on the batch record side, but also even too, frankly, on just a lot of the actual analytical methods that were being used throughout this pandemic, because this company in particular was using it everywhere from clinical manufacturing to commercial manufacturing to analytics to early stage R&D. They deployed this system out in different parts. They didn't roll out the entire system to every single site. They rolled out components of it along the way. But for the teams that did adopt the core platform components, they saw the uptick in data cycle and feedback loops, being able to access the data, model the data, and then being able to make predictions with that data. They were able to do so at a rate in which they really hadn't seen before. So we saw, again, throughout the pandemic, and this is just one customer that, really saw the benefits of this. But the takeaway here is that, the theories and principles of Pharma 4.0 and these concepts of intelligent manufacturing in 2020, they really did switch from theory to actual practical application, and application them at scale. And so where is this all going? We're going to get through this pandemic. Like I said earlier, the world is now seeing that the end of this pandemic goes straight through the heart of this industry. But where is it going next? Where is it going next once we actually get out of this pandemic? And what do the next couple of years look like for both this technology and what we at least believe to be for this industry? And so for us, we believe the next wave of this whole kind of process and where this technology is really going to deliver on the future of this space is really around cell and gene therapy manufacturing. We actually, beyond just the challenges that were faced in 2020, we actually saw a very high uptick in cell and gene therapy manufacturing, specifically because, the industry has gone through a pretty major change here. We went from making one batch for many to one batch for one. And that is a major shift in how organizations manufacture. It's a major shift for then how the software that then is actually used to execute on that process is both delivered and realized. And so where we really start to see the world now going over the next couple of years is, of course, delivering on small and large molecule. That continues to be a core component of where we see this technology delivering on and helping speed to market, the next wave of both small and large molecule manufacturing. But more importantly, we're also starting to see that for the real enablement of cell and gene therapy, for the therapies that we see coming up here that are coming out to market, there really needed to be a much more flexible and much more adaptable tool that delivered on the principles of Pharma 4.0 and intelligent manufacturing to really deliver on what we see as this next wave of therapies coming to market. So for us, this is where we really see the future going, and not just the future, but what we think is going to start to happen over the very near term here. We will get out of this pandemic. It is coming. And this industry would have been the industry to solve it, to actually do this for humanity at a scale that all of us, I think are counting on. And so we're incredibly excited about what the future holds here. And we're proud of how our team has stood shoulder to shoulder with the men and women in this industry that have worked tirelessly this year in the backdrop of just an unmeasurable number of challenges. And so I don't know if the full world fully appreciates what this industry did this year and what this industry achieved. But at least I know all of us on this call know it, and we see it, and we live it every day. So I want to wish everybody, I'm going to wrap up here, but definitely a healthy and happy, safe holiday season. But it's definitely a lot to be thankful for as we head into now 2021. There are definitely brighter days ahead. So thank you. And yeah, any questions? I know we just have a few minutes here.
We've got a question coming in. Do you see your platform replacing traditional MES platforms or working more as an add-on? If so, what are some of the key differentiators of business value for Apprentice as it compares to traditional MES platforms in the industry today?
Absolutely. So we're currently taking two different approaches where for organizations who do not have an existing MES system, we've developed a whole host of tools to be able to take them from paper to digital. Again, not just from paper to digital though, but more importantly, to move them into this new intelligent world where our key differentiators are, number one, setup speeds. So a typical MES, setup times are 3 to 5 years. There's a whole harmonization process and holistic process that you have to go through first before you actually move from paper to digital. But because we've invested incredibly heavily on converting the existing paper content into smart content and using what exists today, we've been able to see setup times drop down to the order of magnitude of months and not years. And so for organizations that are moving from paper to digital, this is a way where they can get up and running very, very quickly. But more importantly, once they actually do get up and running, our system has been specifically designed both ergonomically through the headsets and mobile tech that we have been developed, but more importantly, the reliable execution through the augmented reality technique media and smart data capture, which then allows teams to execute more reliably relative to, say, a classic MES that is more suited on either a flat 2D screen or on terminal that is very lightweight or inflexible and somewhat cumbersome around the execution of the process. More importantly, we've already built in all of the actual machine learning and AI that this whole industry, that we've seen at least, is really pushing to adopt, where now that has become the heart of our core system, so that out of the box, you then are able to then benefit from all these new and emerging technologies across the entire chain. But for organizations who already have an existing MES system, how we are already complementing those systems is that we then can then take their procedures, which right now those SOPs, even if they're in an existing MES, those SOPs are right now living in as PDF documents on a screen. And so we take those PDF documents that already exist and we use our augmented procedures module to then augment and enhance those SOPs to sit alongside the execution system, which is more running a lot of the work instructions and integrations with the automation systems, et cetera. So we've taken two different approaches, but either way, we can take a company completely greenfield from paper to digital to intelligent. But for the organizations who already have a system, we can be complementary through both our augmented procedures and our language independent collaboration to really enhance day-to-day execution.
Great, nice story. Any other questions from the audience?
Excellent. Well, I hope everyone has a great and healthy and safe holiday season here, and really excited about what 2021 brings, because 2020, this industry definitely met the world's greatest challenge here. So really excited for the future. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Angelo. Alrighty, we have one more set of speakers. I see Jenny's on. Is it just going to be you, Jenny, or is your partner also going to be joining?